Okay, we will begin the city council work session for Tuesday, July 13th. Approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, we'll go straight right into our public comment. Who's ever wishing out there to make a statement?
What I want to speak about regards to the community grants, so we wait to that moment, that second item? Just go ahead.
Just go ahead.
Okay. Andrew Johnson, about 54. I am speaking on behalf of the Telephone Arts Colony tonight, and I want to just talk to you guys about the community grant process. May or may not be on your radar, but well, let me first say that the community grant has been great to local organizations. We appreciate that generosity and support. It's a big deal. In this latest community grant round, one member of the committee voted for zero funding for 4 groups that applied. That would be the Arts Colony, the Arts Association, the Coaster Theater, and the Sunset Empire Transportation District. So when you have a 5-person committee and someone votes a 0, that takes those awards, it warps them by thousands of dollars. It's really significant, and it's a lot of power for an outlier to have. And I think it's also worth mentioning that we're all coming out of COVID. The Arts Colony specifically has not been able to do our biggest fundraiser annually twice. We came up with Art in the Park to do a fundraiser, and it was a great success. And we raised about a quarter of what we've normally raised, had we been able to do what we normally do. I take issue a little bit with the way the process went, because this member of the committee did not ask any questions or share any of their misgivings about with any of the groups who were scored a 0. I think the groups would have had a chance to rebut some of those claims, and I think there was also some contradictions in this member's reasoning, and it felt like the process was a little hairy, and I want to bring that to the council's attention for this, and ask you to kind of consider the numbers that you received tonight in that light, and also consider a way this process could be revised in the future. I mean, imagine if, thank you that there's not a starve the beast type of, politician on the city council, but imagine if one person could, even if they were voted 4-1, could affect budgets by 20%. Pretty radical. So yeah, I guess I just wanted to bring that to your attention.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you, Andrew.
Anna?
Hi, Lila Whitman with the Cannon Beach Arts Association. PO Box 20821, but I wrote it down here. Thank you. And I have the same concerns that Andrew expressed. We applied for the community grant, and Kelsey asked, why are you applying for more this year? And my response was, and I'll read it to you, Cannon Beach Arts Association is a nonprofit. Our mission is to support artists by selling their art and providing them with an income and supporting our employees who are also artists. We will always be reliant on grant funding due to our mission. We're not actually asking for more than usual. We've never been funded at our request. Our business model has changed due to COVID-19. Previously, we operated our gallery with volunteers, and the employees did background work, writing grants, managing the budget, etc. We do not feel comfortable running the gallery at any given time, staffed with volunteers due to COVID-19. We have limited the number of people in the gallery at any given time, resulting in less foot traffic and reduced sales. We don't feel comfortable asking volunteers for their vaccine status and don't see that changing anytime soon. We feel far better about providing our employees with a stable job and know that they are vaccinated and know the COVID guidelines. We are offering more services online and are focused on improving marketing so that our audience isn't as dependent on foot traffic. We received TAC funding for the winter season and need support during the summer season to maintain our mission-focused operations. It's just curious to me that there are 6 criteria listed on the city website. We meet all 6 of the criteria, so how do you get a 0 if you meet all 6 criteria? As Andrew mentioned, we did score a 0. We attended the application session and no questions were asked. And it just seems kind of incongruous to me that if you score somebody a 0, you would have questions about what's missing in their application or what you're concerned about, and give them the opportunity to elaborate and respond on your concerns. And like Andrew mentioned, one person scoring 0 drops your whole score by 20%. So if you're going to have an outlier, and I understand there's outliers, then maybe you should use the mode or the mean, not the average, and some way to modify one person being very different from the others. I also know that historically 0s have not been applied. So to me, it's a process issue. I watched the video. The person who scored 0, I was unclear about why that person was scoring 0. Another one of the members said she was unclear about the process. She wondered why the city of Cannon Beach gave money to the city of Astoria. So to me, clearly there was an orientation issue for new members, and it doesn't appear that the process was followed. So like Andrew said, when you get the scores and the committee reports, please just take that into consideration, because we feel like I write a lot of grants, and we have successfully gotten a lot of grants. It's sort of sad to have your own community not support you when Ford Family Foundation and the Miller Foundation, all these other entities that aren't part of our village support you. So there you go. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Lila.
Stick around for the discussion. We might have questions.
Okay.
Anybody else have a comment? Okay. We have one sign up. Christie, do we have Amber available?
Don't see Amber.
She didn't reply to my email because she requested to speak. And when I asked her, are you going to do it in person or Zoom, she didn't reply. So I put her on just in case.
Okay, thank you. Last chance? Okay, we'll go on and see where we. First item, reservoir site update.
Good evening. After reviewing the results of the water system seismic resiliency study, the city of Cannon Beach identified a replacement of the main reservoir as top priority. To move forward on the project, the city hired Windsor engineers to conduct a reservoir siting study. This study evaluates reservoir sizing alternatives, flood pathways if there were to be a failure to the current reservoir, and whether the current reservoir should be retained or abandoned. The study also examines possible alternative reservoir sites, compares the various material options for the new reservoir, and estimated costs. I have Windsor Engineering here tonight that's going to provide the overview of the study that they conducted.
Great.
Travis's.
Hi there. Good afternoon. Good evening.
Hi, is Travis?
Yes, I assume you can hear me?
We can.
Okay. So yeah, this is Travis Tormanen, and I'm here with Oliver Cato. We're with Windsor Engineers. Howdy. And I'd like to thank the mayor and council for the opportunity to share the project status on this reservoir siting study. So we put together a few slides and wanted to talk a little bit about what the project's about, and then we'll talk about the objectives and then some of our recommendations. So as you all are well aware, the city is vulnerable to earthquake and tsunami damage. There's been several studies done to look into what to do about that. And this is in line with the state of Oregon has been out front in resiliency planning, and Cannon Beach is doing its part. And one of the findings of those studies was that the main reservoir is vulnerable to failure during an earthquake event. So Windsor was tasked by the city to evaluate whether we could rehab the tank or whether we need to replace it. So we've started that work. We're actually nearly done with that work. And so our objectives were to determine whether the reservoir could be rehabbed. The tank is in a spot where if it failed, it could cause severe damage to surrounding areas from floodwaters. So we looked into that. And then we've looked at the different alternatives. If we do need to replace it, where would we put the new tank? And then we're recommending today a path forward. We've had a chance to meet with the staff and to go over their thoughts and get their input, because the team knows a lot about the city's water system, of course. So why is the existing reservoir a problem? So first of all, it's a critical asset. All of the drinking water in Cannon Beach comes through this reservoir. So it provides peak storage during tourist season. During the middle of the day, there's often more water being drawn than could be produced. So you end up needing storage for that. You need storage for fire flow. It's a state requirement. And if there is a natural disaster and the pipes are broken all over town, having 1 million gallons of water in this tank and 1 million plus in your other tanks provides an opportunity for distributing water to the public through maybe less conventional means, such as taking water out of the tank and putting it in containers for distribution. So the tank was designed just fine for the requirements that were in place way back in the day, but they're not up to current seismic standards. So if there was a big earthquake, this tank would likely fail, and the column supporting the concrete lid would probably be where it would start. And it's both ground movement, but also sloshing of water that destabilizes the tank. If this was an empty tank, it probably wouldn't fail, but of course, an empty tank doesn't do as much good. So as I mentioned before, there's a flood concern, and I've got a little more information on that. And what we found is that it's not an easy fix. We can't just put Band-Aids on this. It's going to be a significant project to fix this. So as we went through the project, we're looking to balance public safety and emergency response with operations. We don't want to fix one problem and create another problem that makes the system difficult to operate. And of course, cost management is always at the forefront of our thinking. This slide you may recognize from our past work when we looked at the capital improvement plan for water. That green line is intended to be a replacement pipeline to secure the backbone of the system all the way from the springs to this reservoir. And actually, there's another backbone pipeline that would go to the north and south into town coming out of this reservoir. So this just kind of orients you that the reservoir is off to the left, and it's above the public works yard and the RV park underneath some power lines. So as far as rehabilitating the tank, we've talked to 2 different structural experts that work on tanks. One of them, Peterson, actually did some analysis as part of the city's water system plan about 5 years ago. And GHD has an expert that I've worked with for many years. And what we found is that the tank is in good condition. It's holding water, it's not leaking, it's not corroding. but it's just vulnerable to earthquakes. So we looked at, what if we took off the concrete lid and didn't need the columns and put in fiberglass lid? And the problem is that if it's not domed, we have not been able to find a solution that would be approved for potable water, because we can't have rain and fir needles and stuff getting in. So it'd have to be basically a watertight lid. And with the power lines there, we can't put a dome. And what we found is that pretty much we'd have to spend just as much money rehabbing this tank as we would building a new one. And there's a couple of other problems. One is that we can't really take this tank down for construction if we wanted to rehab it. And the other is that even if we did rehab it to current code for several $1 million, you would still have a very old tank. It would just have new features. So our recommendation is a replacement tank of equal size.
Hey, Travis,
Yes.
this is Bruce. How old is that tank?
Is Trevor there?
He's not, Travis, I think Daniel said it was built in 1972.
That sounds about right. Yeah, so it's almost 50 years.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so the city's gotten great life out of it. And we do have some scenarios where we would continue to use the tank, but we would still need to build a new one. So along those lines, even if we do decide to build a new tank, this tank's going to be here for a while because it'll take a while to do a new tank. You get funding, land acquisition, design, and construction. So we're looking at maybe rehabilitating it. It's not going to get it to all the way to seismic standards, but it might reduce the risk. So one option would be to put a little more dirt around the tank, backfill it more, because that provides some back pressure, and that reduces the risk of it failing. And even if it does crack, then maybe you reduce the risk of a catastrophic flood. So we're recommending that an interim project be done that would include seismic valves and some regrading around the tank. So this graphic here shows that if the tank failed, water could flow in one of three directions. If it flows to the north, it would go towards the public works yard and the RV park. If it flows towards the east or northeast, that would go down towards the city's, one of their cache sites. And it would also potentially wipe out the road that accesses the watershed and the treatment plant. And then the third route is towards the south along the power line right away, or the power lines. So we would obviously prefer that it flow to the south because there's no public facilities. And as long as we protect the power poles, then that would cause the least risk and the least damage. So Oliver here has been looking at this, and he's basically come up with a plan where we could build a berm around the top and the right side. And you can see in the red arrows that this would direct any floodwaters towards the south. And as part of this, we could potentially backfill the tank partially or completely, so you don't even see the sidewalls of the tank. And that may help with protecting the tank somewhat. So this would not be a super expensive, and it might be good insurance to make the tank safer. So as far as replacing the tank, we looked at 7 options. Put it next to the existing one, put it at the water treatment site. We looked at a couple of private properties that are nearby. We looked at the Southwind area where the city owns property. We looked at an ODOT piece of property and an Oregon State Parks piece where there's a, slated to be a future observation area. And we found in our analysis that the private properties are probably not going to be feasible. The land is very valuable, and we would have to run pipelines there. So it just doesn't look like it's going to pencil. The Southwind area is too far away, so we would have a long pipeline for that one. And the Oregon State Parks has a couple of disadvantages as well. Getting there, we'd have to go through ODOT property to get there. So it's more pipe and more coordination issues. So the green ones are the ones that we do recommend further consideration. So these are those three that we're looking at. Actually, this shows all of the sites we've considered. See, location 2 is in the watershed. Location 1's right next to the tank, and then the other 4 are kind of clustered near 101. The existing tank is in the orange. The replacement would be in blue. You can see there's lots of curvy lines. There's lots of steep land around here, but the flattest spot is actually near where the existing tank is, and there is room to put a new tank there. We would have to work with the power company and the conference center to see if we can get the appropriate easements or land acquisition to do that. Backup option. So that's our preferred option. We'll show you a table here in a little bit. Our backup option is to put in the reservoir next to the sand filters in the chlorination building on the watershed. This would be nice and secure, away from the public. The disadvantage here is that this is a lower site, so we would have to pump up to proper elevation coming out of the tank. So we'd have to make sure our pump station was really top notch, and we had backup power to make it equally reliable as a tank up on the hill. The third option that we like is an ODOT property. It's right next to Highway 101, but it's actually 40 feet higher in elevation, so it's it'd be kind of out of the way and wouldn't be subject to vandalism or anything because of the hill climb. We have not talked to ODOT about this option, so we don't know if they would be amenable, but you could access it either from Chena or Arbor, and this is pretty close to the city's distribution system, so we like it from that standpoint. So here's those three options that we like the best. Near the existing tank is our recommended first choice if we can work out the issues with the power company and the conference center. And then the treatment and the ODOT site would be our backup options. So next steps, I think this is the last slide here. Interim, so there's 4 steps: council decision, interim project financing, engineering. So that we're recommending tank replacement, but it's up to the city and the council in particular whether to go forward with a project like that. We understand the city has obtained funding to do an interim project, and we think that's terrific. That would allow that regrading to be done, but it would also allow seismic valving at this reservoir, Tolovana Reservoir, and the North Reservoir. And with isolation valves, we can make each of the reservoirs a filling station that could be used for emergency distribution of water. And we could shut off the tanks, isolate the tanks if there's a water main break, so you don't lose all the contents of the tanks in an earthquake. So that is separate from a reservoir replacement, but if that project goes forward first, then we would, whoever's doing that project would make sure that the valving and the piping are considering the future reservoir. So make that future reservoir as easy as possible. As far as project financing, the estimated cost is $3.38 million. And this report that we're finishing up can be used to help obtain funding for the project. And then on the engineering, could do it all at once to get it so-called shovel ready. Or if there's not funding for doing that, then it could be taken to another level. So it's a lot closer to being shovel ready by doing a 30% design, getting the geotech figured out as far as land stability and that sort of thing, pipelines, and get it all figured out, get the prices dialed in, and get a little bit closer to be able to construct it. So that is all I have. I'd be happy to take any questions.
I have a question. This is Mike. I have a question, well, two of them actually. One is and just looking at maps and so forth, I'm wondering why the cache site was not included in this study.
Which cache site are you referring to?
Oh, the one that's along the road. It was mentioned somewhere in the draft document.
Talking the one up behind the public works yard
No,
site?
the one going into the forest reserve.
Okay. I think, and Travis, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was a matter of elevation. We're trying to.
Oh, as far as putting a reservoir near the cache site?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, so that would be possible if there's room there. It would have the same disadvantage of it. It's not the right elevation, so it would need a pump station and a generator next to it. So we think that might drive up the cost a little bit more versus the other options.
Okay, and down at the filter plant, there's already power.
Yeah, the filter plant already has power and there is a pump station there, so we might be able to reuse existing facilities more.
Okay, my other question is, just from my observation, looking at the second and third choices, it would appear to me that the third choice is better than the second choice. And I'm wondering if the reason it was in that order is it required an acquisition of property.
Yes, I would say that's the case. There's a little bit more uncertainty with the ODOT land procurement process.
It certainly seems as, just from an engineering point of view and cost, that that's a better location.
Yeah, there would need to be a way to get the main pipeline from, somewhere up here over to this site. So there would be some added pipeline cost. But on the other hand, that might, in the long term, that might not be added cost because we do want to get a new pipeline all the way along 101 alignment to Tolovana. So we might be moving some costs forward to this reservoir project. Yeah, no, there's a lot to like about this. If ODOT would be amenable.
And Mike, with the rankings that we have now, it's based on what we know now.
Mhm.
As a result of us having this information, Karen's been making contact with ODOT, with the Christian Center, because they own the property where we currently are. And information coming as a result of those inquiries could change things.
Okay. Am I correct? I think Travis just mentioned it, but my understanding in the long-term plan, we were looking at pipeline paralleling 101
that's right.
along that same area, which would, again, from an engineering point of view, seems like a superior site.
I mean, ideally, if we go with that site and we handle that replacement of that pipeline all along the highway there, doing that at the same time would be the ideal.
Okay.
approach. I'd like,
All right. Thank you.
if we end up with that as being the spot.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I actually had the same one that Mike had. I thought that was perfect. The flip road. But again, it's the acquisition and the unknowns that we still need to find out. The other question I was curious about is if we maintain the current tank for the remainder of its lifetime, while we build a new one somewhere else, we still use the current one,
Sure.
obviously, until the earthquake hits. And
Have to have it in place until we build the new.
I guess where I'm going is how big does the new one need to be? Could there be efficiencies in the size so that it covers the daily use and is a guaranteed safe surviving thing post-earthquake, still operating the old one, and that might help the footprint in the various locations be a little more feasible.
Yeah, well, I'll let them answer that. I had the same
Yeah.
thought.
We have considered that, and we could build the new tank smaller. We would need to get it at the right elevation, but it wouldn't have to be as big a diameter, and use the existing tank. The problem is if the existing tank completely fails, then you'd want to make sure you have enough to meet the fire flow requirements. And I don't think you quite would. But in an emergency, that would still serve the purposes that we're looking at. And if the main reservoir only cracked and we could repair it, then maybe the new tank would meet your needs while you're doing that emergency repair. So there are some things to like about keeping the main reservoir on even after you build a new tank. And we might be able to shrink the size of the replacement reservoir. We would just need to look a little bit harder at how much we could reduce it and still, not be kind of penny wise, not foolish on the long term.
Yeah, and the other aspect I was kind of thinking about was if you have a smaller tank next to the old tank, then you have a chance to replace the old tank when a functioning tank is sitting there with another one that is also smaller, so that you actually have an aggregate that's more than what we got now, but you have nice new tanks. And then you have two tanks that gives you some operational balancing for cleaning and maintenance and stuff like
I
that.
considered that as well.
Okay. And I do think that the backfill and grading is obvious. So yeah, I think that's a great idea. I'm surprised we haven't done that years past.
I would hope you'd be looking at the flow path of all of our reservoirs. The one that would flow right under my house.
Mhm.
On the north.
I think that that would probably be a good preliminary design task with that seismic valving and regrading project. Karen, I like that suggestion. Take a look at that.
Ideally, I'd like to be able to go forward with re-seismic valves and do the site improvement and get us positioned where we have options for what decision is on location and size of construction of the new tank. At least we've kind of stabilized our current situation and lessened our risk a bit. If council feels that that's the direction you want to go.
Yeah. And again, I still think that the water treatment filtering site is the least, just because of the pumping and all the extra technology that needs to go into it. So the other two sites are high, give us good pressure and all that. So, okay.
I think we're still gonna have pumping to get to a site different than what we are now.
Yeah.
So I think we're in that. My thing is, I just want to simplify the system. I want to make sure the tank is big enough that if it's the only one, it works and we're able to go ahead and take care of things for another 50 years.
The other, this is kind of a way off, not really off topic, but if we perchance happen to go with the ODOT site, part of the trail plan followed that same access. So at one point, we were talking about having a trail, a bike trail, would follow around on the ODOT right away. And that could be serve as both a bike trail and service to the tank, if that works. So it is an added little bonus for that site. Yes, it does.
Yep, good point.
Okay, so Brandon.
Still questions? How long are we expected to have a life of a new tank? How many years should we be able to get out of a new one?
Hopefully as long as the old one.
Travis?
You really should be able to get 50, 75 years. One of the other parts of the project that I didn't include in this presentation, in the interest of time, was the materials. We're looking at concrete versus welded steel versus bolted steel. Steel tanks need to be painted approximately every 20 years, and perhaps even more often in the marine environment. So the public works staff knows that the wastewater plant, we've had a problem with stuff corroding and crazy. So either way though, you can get 50 to 75 years. It's just that you would have to repaint the steel tank a couple times along the way.
And I think that we've had good luck with like the concrete tank. And one of the things that impressed me when we did the cleaning of the tank is that the cleaning companies, I think they said usually they find like, this much sediment or something on the bottom. But with us, it was like hardly any. And to me, that's the quality of the water that we have, the quality of the materials in the system. And I would be really hesitant to step back from that. Because, our water is so good, and it shows just in like the water that sits in the tank. It's not corroding. It's, doesn't have a lot of sediment in it. So I tend to be conservative on those things.
So I guess my question is that the technology that exists today wouldn't be able to provide a tank that would last significantly longer than the one that we have currently. Am I hearing that correctly?
Yeah.
Yeah, with another concrete tank.
With whatever technology that's available.
Yeah, I mean, there's tanks out there that are 100 years old, and now that we know that we have to plan for a subduction zone earthquake is the worst case scenario, then we can do that. So it'll last for a long time.
It should be. I can see where you're going with it, Brandon. And I think with new technology, better materials, and a better constructed tank, I think that we should be able to exceed what we have now. Remember too, one of the ironies of this is that the tank that's there is still good.
It's the seismic.
It's the seismic part.
Yes.
And so, I mean, that tank is, capable of more years, but in a bad seismic event, we'll lose it. So, but I think I'm confident that what you're looking for, which is a longer lasting tank, we could with the technology and the proper design.
Okay, that is exactly my intention.
Okay, yeah, ours too. I think that when we're talking about the seismic valves and things like that, I believe I sent you out an email saying that we've been awarded $586,000, which was in terms of a loan. And that was what we based the rate increase on. But I think I told you I was so proud of all the folks that worked on it, that of the $586,000, almost $300,000 is loan forgiven, principal forgiven. So for a $586,000 in project, we will have to repay $300,000, and that's at 1% over 30 years. So those are mighty good terms for what we're trying to accomplish and what we're trying to provide for our folks.
Would the money that came from the state be able to come into this at all?
Possibly. We're still trying to figure out exactly how much is coming from the state. I think I mentioned one time that they said it was like, I don't know, 360 or something.
That's the figure I had in my head.
Right, but the projects that they approved were higher than that. And so we're still kind of negotiating about, well, what projects are there? And the projects that they selected were not necessarily our top priority, and trying to see if there's some flexibility. Could we use those funds, especially if we got a principal forgiveness loan for some of this, to be able to go ahead and cover some of the other important projects we had going. So I think that's the ARPA. And that one it's weird. We have questions on it. we kind of have the total that was given, but there's still a lot of questions with it and nobody's seen the money.
Okay,
All right, so we'd ask that we have the direction to move forward.
can I just be clear about what it is you're asking to move forward on?
Russ, Karen, if you want to take it, I think it's to do the evaluation on those three options and then come back and see what's possible, what's not, and what the cost might be.
Like to be able to move forward with the parties that concern those properties that we described to you, and then bring that information back to you and tell you what we found, be able to take the planned action.
Are you talking about the top three property, top three recommendations? The green?
And what about I'm sorry, I don't know what to call it, but either the backfilling and then the seismic.
That'd be the site improvement, and that's what the 586,000 that we were awarded would cover.
I'm sorry, are you looking for any direction from the council about that?
But that one is actually an approved project.
Okay,
Yeah, and
great.
And
working.
in March, when we gave you the presentation of our priority projects, I had let you guys know that we had pursued that funding, but hadn't been awarded those dollars. But that's what those dollars would cover, is that phase one of the kickoff of the water resiliency. So those 3 seismic valves, all the associated piping, and the site improvement to mitigate any flooding if that tank were to give way.
Great.
So we'll be coming back to you with some more information.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Travis.
Thank you, Travis.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you, guys.
Okay, next item. Community Service Community Grant Awards recommendation.
Sorry. Yes, you've heard some testimony on these. I know that we have Elaine Sorensen is on Zoom. I don't know if Stacy or Barb or Les want to talk about the awards.
I think we're gonna have Jillian speak first.
Okay, all right. Here she is.
Hi. Hi, I'm kind of juggling a remote connection here, so I'll do my best. All right.
Hey, Jillian, thank you.
You're welcome. Hi.
Okay, if you want to start, give us a rundown of what you got.
In terms of yes, so what you have before you is the average of the recommendations from the members of the Parks Committee. And we have followed the procedure, the process that has been in place for many, many years. The review of the grant applications, bringing any questions that we may have to the applicants, having the presentations from applicants and having an opportunity there to learn more, considering the grant history, which is also provided, and considering all of these factors, then each committee member makes their determination, understanding that the need is always greater and perhaps even more so this year. You know, the city is very generous in providing these funds, and we make the decisions individually based on those factors and our own understanding of need. So we followed the process that we have followed. We also, just as a side note, we did have some orientation and talked about what the grant process is and history of the community grants and a little bit about that, and gave members a chance to ask any questions that they might have had in some months prior to the applications being submitted. So that's our general process. I understand. I appreciate the comments of the 2 applicants previously. Also, every year we debrief after the grant awards. We discuss any questions that may have come up or anything that we want to review. And we certainly are open to and welcome any feedback from folks. We've heard some tonight, and we will be doing that debrief also. So there'll be another opportunity to consider any questions and how we move through this going forward.
Okay, questions or concerns?
I guess a question I would have is during your final meetings where you determined what you were going to recommend to the council, and you had discussion about several of these having 0, and yet that's what you're approving. So I'm trying to figure out, are you agreeing with the 0 count from one member and how it affects the average? Or did you make adjustments to try to compensate for that in your post-review before you made a recommendation?
Yeah, we did not make an adjustment. And this is, to my knowledge, this is an outlier situation. It's unusual. It has, at least in my experience and my years on the committee, hasn't come up this way. So typically there's a range of recommendation among committee members. People's recommendations vary, and then those averages come out. In this case, when those numbers were presented to the committee, we each arrive at our recommendations individually. That's not something we do in consultation in meetings. So there's not discussion together on that. But when we did look at this, there is actually, to my knowledge, not a mechanism for sending that back, because each committee member takes into consideration all that I mentioned before and makes their determination. But there is not a mechanism that I'm aware of for sending that back or having discussion, other than if someone wants to make an adjustment in their recommendations. So if that's something that we want to discuss looking forward, we can. But at this point, I don't think there was a mechanism for formally doing that, if I understand your question.
Yes, that was, thank you.
Well, and Jelaine, you did arrive at the 90,000, which is the allowed amount.
Yes.
So if you were to adjust it, you'd have to take away from some of the other applicants, correct?
Well, yes, it would have to be adjusted. And I think my concern and while I certainly understand the questions raised by the applicants, I understand their point of view on this. I think that having without a formal way of going back or a procedural way of going back and making those changes, I think it would be, how can I say this? I think applicants may be more or less happy with the award that they get, but I think it could potentially be problematic if we need to have a mechanism for reconsidering, or if we need to have a different criteria that the committee members are working with. That could be something that we certainly discuss. And if council wants to direct us to consider that, we can do that. But in this instance, given the process that we have and following the process that we had, each person had given their recommendations. So, and we did come to the 90,000. So we would have to go back and reconsider those. And we have not had a process to do that. Does that make sense? We haven't had a procedure for doing that.
And I know, having been on the TAC committee, that you kind of horse trade towards the end or during. It's a different process. So everyone kind of says how they feel, and people kind of accommodate each other. So I think since this issue has been brought up, we certainly need to figure out maybe a way so that this won't happen like this again. Or, because I think this is the first time this has ever happened.
Last, I believe there was maybe not several zeros incorporated into it, but there was at least one
Yes,
in the past.
yes, and, I can speak to that if you have a question about that, but
Well, it just seems like it hit all the arts and that bothers me a little.
If I can just ask a question to Jim. Jim, did this happen at TAC?
This has happened at TAC.
Yeah.
In fact, quite often, the preliminary judgments of people are often a zero because we do not think it is the proper source of funding.
Right.
That is often a consideration. Even in our deliberations this time, there was a proposal that began with two of us with zeros and ended up with three individuals shifting their numbers after discussion and feedback among the members of the committee.
Yeah.
But there is a long TAC history of zeros being put up.
But the point is, you do get together and discuss, and the
Yeah.
person has to defend their reasoning for their rating.
And that has resulted, therefore, in the changing of votes, that so-called horse trading that Robin mentions from her experience on our committee.
Mhm. It's very energetic.
But it involves listening and asking questions.
Yeah.
And enthusiastic.
Mhm.
Jillian, do you see any of that kind of horse trading going on with community grants?
sorry, I was muted. In my experience on the committee, which I think is coming up on 7 years, so I can't speak for, many years past, but while I have been on the committee, it has not. We have, as I mentioned, we consider the applications. We hear the grant presentations and can ask questions and have interaction then. But we don't devote time as a group to doing that kind of back and forth about the numbers. Each person goes then and makes their determinations, and they are averaged. And then we do look at those numbers after we receive them and see if there are questions, see if there are any comments. My experience again has been that while there's a range, it's not, question hasn't come up in terms of the process or the procedure previously. But we don't, yeah.
How comfortable do you feel with somebody giving a zero if there isn't any kind of a back and forth or any questions asked or any reasons given? How comfortable do you feel with somebody giving a zero and just not commenting on it at all?
So can I just ask in terms of, I would say that given the process that we have now, each person makes their own determination, and there is no criteria that says members must give a certain amount or that it must be distributed a certain way. So in terms of the process and the way it has worked, that was followed. Now, I think individual members may have different feelings about the amounts that people allocate. I understand the concern that was raised with this in terms of it being an unusual situation and the concern of the recipients in terms of the impact. So I will just share that there was one incident, and I think this is the incident that was referred to a moment ago, where there was one organization in one very unusual year where I recommended a zero, but I gave very clear reasons about the specific factors that organization had going. It was a change from previously. There were things that were of concern. They were very specific. And we did discuss that in the committee, and I spoke to that, and that was the one, I believe the 1-0 that was there recently. So in that sense, yes. And there was question at our past meeting where the person who voted those zeros was invited to speak about that.
If you don't mind, so Les Sinclair, Cannon Beach resident, and on the Parks Committee. First time I've been through this process, and I just wanted to share a few comments. I was interested in how this was going to go because it was new to me. And I did see the zero allocations. I also saw several full allocations, much higher than any average number as well. And so what I did is I looked at the mode, I looked at the mean, I looked at the average. I also did a calculation where I dropped the high and low and looked at those numbers. I mean, and although I don't have it here, I can't really show you what I did. In the end, it did not change the numbers a whole lot. We had substantial agreement, and as it happened, the very lows seemed to balance out some of the very highs. So we did look at it, and I just wanted to share that with you. And that's one of the reasons I was comfortable with the final recommendation, because I have done the math.
Oh,
Yes, sir.
when you say it didn't change it, are you like by
It wasn't
several $1,000s?
So when I looked at the column of recommended averages, I didn't think that the changes that those different techniques made were material.
Okay.
They did make obviously some change, but in the grand scheme of things, I didn't find it to be significant. If I had, then I was prepared to bring that up in the meeting where we were, Parks meeting was discussing this, but I just didn't see it. So I did not bring it up.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else?
Thank you.
I have a question.
Les, Les,
Oh, go ahead.
Mike wants
Oh,
to,
no,
Was it for me or?
no, just, I don't know who it's for, the committee. When somebody decides not to award anything, that's like deciding not to vote. And it is almost like an abstaining vote. And if someone abstains, then why not just average those that felt that they were awarded? Unless that person abstaining gives good reasons, or just suppose any reason as to why they are abstaining, then the remainder of the committee goes ahead and votes and averages. Now, somebody can play a game of this, well, I award $1. So maybe abstaining should be anything, less than $100 or some number, but it just seems the high. I was also interested in what Les looked at, getting rid of the high one and the low one. And it really didn't change it overall that much. Certainly it improved the ones that are really a question right now, but not a whole lot. Because there's so many, it spreads that difference out over a large number. So I have a hard time saying we should make any changes now. This is a recommendation of the committee. It's not going to change a lot, but I think we need to change the process for getting there. And the horse trading, maybe that's a way to do it, and everybody has to defend their position and make adjustments. And it seems cumbersome to me. If the committee would like to consider the idea that, zeros are a minimal recommendation is the same thing as just abstaining and not voting, then you average the others. But I guess I'd look for the committee to come up with a recommendation. They're the ones that have experienced it and dealt with it, and all the members can have that discussion. And we take this recommendation, but then ask for a recommendation for improvements in the process.
And there are good reasons sometimes.
Oh, there are.
For turning a project down or something, because the nonprofits sometimes do go through some issues. So, yeah, I'd like the committee to work on that.
At least forcing somebody to give their reasons.
Mhm.
And if they don't
Yes.
give a reason, then don't.
Yeah.
I think that'd be a great conversation to have and to look specifically at that. Like I said, this was an outlier. We haven't run into this situation, but I think it allows us to have that conversation. And like I said, we're very we welcome feedback or specific input as we come up on that, that conversation will be a little bit later in the fall. So, yeah, thank you.
Just a second, Leila. I think the council has two different points that we need to talk about. We just did, and I think that one is important. Fix the problem that we have just discovered. If the committee is willing to look into it, great. Maybe we could do one of our joint type things and talk about it a little bit, because I think there might be some input there. The other issue is we have disparaging problem, I think, what was awarded this time. So I think the council has the ability to adjust this. I mean, we don't have to accept the recommendation that are as it was written. We can do some adjusting if we as a council agree on that. We could also send it back to the parks and have them redo it. Not that I'm suggesting that, but it's a possibility because we could do that. So having said that, Lila, did you want to inject anything?
The only thing I would inject is it's obvious to me this was a process issue. And the process needs to be corrected. I live here. I do not want to reverse something that this committee did and then have my partner organizations be upset with me. So as far as I'm concerned, the only point of coming tonight was to let you know how we felt, to let you know that at least we think there's a process issue and that it needs to be corrected. But that's in the long term. I don't think it's in the short term. You can't unbundle this now. But honestly, why go to a meeting, give your presentation and have nobody ask you a question, then give you a 0? That just doesn't make sense to me. So, you know, it's back to it's a process issue, and good job fixing the process and listening to our concerns.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I think that, to me, is what I've heard the most, is that if I were to take the committee's word that if you factored in the 0 or didn't, that the grant wouldn't have changed that much, but just that to not be, in their opinion, heard, I think is the problem. And I would like to see that addressed.
I think it should be at least requested, if not required, that when you make a determination as to how much money you want to allocate, whether it's 0 or, you know, what full amount, you have some reason for it. And you should be at least asked, if not required, to express the reason that you're making those recommendations. So that somebody has, so first of all, the organizations know why, that there might be a problem and what that problem might be, and that they could have a chance to, in the next year, repair that problem.
I think also on top of that, there should be a means for the committee to go through the process, but also if they need to, re-go through the process. If a discussion happens that there is some dramatic points of view that are brought up, that might not have been heard by the other committee members at some point. So that this first discussion will have influenced a second round of gambling, whatever.
So if they have an opportunity to adjust their
like kind of
based
like
on the
Jim was saying.
information. Yeah.
Can I?
Andrew?
There was just a lot of confusion in the process. I would say, just from the Arts Colony perspective, the person who voted 0 in their later explanation, not during our meeting or interview, suggested that because we manage Tologana Hall, it should be a city line item budget. So they're suggesting there's value there, but then I don't think that's the way you go about making that change.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's our decision. Or the budget committees. Okay.
So, Mayor, when you are when council is comfortable with the recommendations, then we will forward it to Jenna's August 3rd.
August 3rd.
This is your work session for it. And your vote can be on August 3rd if you're okay with the numbers.
Council?
It's not that I'm uncomfortable. I kind of take the committee at their word about it not changing that much. But if we were to adjust it, where would the money come from?
Yeah.
If we were to add to it, I'm not interested at all in undoing the grants awarded already and then redistributing them.
It would come from like a general fund contingency, something like that.
And is that something that's possible?
Yes, yes, sir.
Can I add one other thing? I was never able to find the actual committee members' votes on, for the packet. I didn't see the packet online. It's like the community grant packet with all the applications in full, I was never able to find online.
We typically don't put that in there.
In the past, it has been. So I've gone through.
City council packet had.
We kind of do the same packet every year, and we do a history and.
But that information, that information is available and we can get it to you.
Tax has always been in there, so every year tax has been in there, but since I've done community grants, it had never gone to council. I mean, it is available though, should anyone request it.
Okay. Would you like us to provide that?
I would like to see the vote numbers to do our own.
Sure.
math on that.
Okay, we'll make that happen.
I'll send it tomorrow.
Were you done, Brandon?
I guess I'd just like to follow that up if there's any interest in the council in doing so. I was more bringing it up for a discussion purpose.
Yeah, I don't see any reason to add more. This is not the approved, this is the recommended. So in that sense, they're not written in stone yet until we approve them. So in that sense, to me, I'm uncomfortable with the way they turned out. I don't really want to go through the process ourselves to nitpick. I would approve it if it was council's wish, but I would also, I look at what I see are glaring percentage differences. There's several instances where it's more than half. And then other cases where it's dramatically less than half. So again, I didn't have a chance to go through the numbers and look at the differences and all that kind of stuff point by point, but it just seems.
May I?
Sure, Joanne.
Yeah, just had a thought. I hear the question, and I wonder if one option would be for the committee, which we will be meeting later this week. We have this on the agenda, and to have some discussion there to see how we might address this. And as council isn't voting on this at this meeting, we could certainly bring back anything to council regarding those discussions, and that we can see if that helps to address any of the several points that you all have raised.
To Brandon's point, that if council wanted to, for the discussion of the committee, say, well, we can add 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 or something for them to reallocate. Or if you want, when we bring it to you on August 3rd, we can say, okay, we found that this additional funding in case you want to reallocate some. So I think that, what Brandon brought up, there's two ways for us to get to that if there's consensus to do. Or two opportunities.
Andrew, go ahead.
We talk about maybe refining the process in the future. I just want to bring up something that, you're looking at the amount of asks versus the amount of awards suggested. It was brought up to the committee member who voted 0 to me, personally, not at the meeting late after it had happened, that it was upset by the largesse of the ask. And I think that's the way the committee works by trimming the numbers themselves, that there's no incentive to ask for a small amount. So I don't think you should be penalized. And we all go into it knowing and expecting these numbers are going to be trimmed and played with. So like, that just leaves, like, it was a weird thing to be held against some of the groups. And the process being what it is, I don't see how it incentivizes someone to not ask for a lot, but it shouldn't be held against you. And it was, and that was mentioned.
The only group that I do know that does really keep it down is the Cannon Beach Chorus. I mean, they ask pretty much for what they need and no more. And it's always been like that as far as I know. So that does happen from time to time.
Which is more about being penalized or this perception that, that you're asking too much when the process is so loose and organic that, it's.
If I could again, and I think looking, we do consider the past history, which really gives an idea because yes, there's a range again in terms of what applicants request, but the history really gives a sense of kind of where that has landed for several past years and gives a comparison point there. And if I could, just one other quick thought. One aspect of this that I'm just is coming to mind is just the precedent, because if there are things council would like the committee to consider, I think that is certainly, as I said, something we can do. But I think setting the precedent of, I don't know what a future situation might be. Like I say, this is the first time, but if a situation comes up and there is a dissatisfaction with the amount of an award that the committee has made, given going through the process that we have, that council allocating additional funds to distribute monies outside of that process that the committee has gone through. I would just ask that council think about the precedent of that, and if that's something that makes sense to establish. If we can go back and work with the process and address this within the committee, I think that would be the place it would make sense to me to go initially.
No, I guess I'm uncomfortable with going back, adding money, and we decide without having the input from the applicants and all the discussion. I'm not prepared to start reallocating a new amount. We budgeted for this. There's been a lot of work put into it. This is what they've come up with the process we have in place. I think we've identified a problem with process. There've been a number of suggestions on how to improve that, and suggested that the committee get together and make some recommendations to the council for the next go round. And as I said earlier, I would stick with these numbers and not try to sit up here and make adjustments.
Yeah, they go through an elaborate process to get to these numbers, and I sure as heck don't want to go through that same process and try to redo their work, because, we trust, we trust them,
But I think it would be good for them to have that meeting and maybe come back to us with some ideas.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, if they want to make that adjustment and come back to us, that's fine.
Okay, sounds like marching order. Okay.
Okay, so the committee will meet, they may make some changes, whatever it is, but whatever they come up with is what we bring to you on the 3rd. Actually, if there is multiple, we'll bring you both. So you can have a comparison.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Next item. Oh, tax.
Hi. James Kingwell, PO Box 382, Cannon Beach, Oregon, here for the TAC committee. I did bring my own notes that included those original voting records and the changes that were made even in committee on the voting. I may not make your deliberations easier here, but let me give some perspective. Several years ago, the TAC committee did come to this group and were allowed to extend our membership by 2 members from 5 to 7. This was done to give us a broader perspective and more inputs. We established a procedure for making our recommendations that involve voting. And for all of the members who are eligible to vote on a given item, this year I was recused from voting on 4 items, appropriate because there was a conflict of interest. Other members were allowed to vote. 1 member was not present and did not vote. So when we averaged all our numbers, we were looking at the inputs of 6 people, with the exception of the 4 that I was recused from. So there were inputs from 5 people. There were, we had a process problem within our committee at one time ourselves, but it was on the other end of the spectrum, individuals who wanted to grant more money than the applicants had even applied for. And our committee response within the committee was to say, hey, let's talk this over with city council. And we came back with the notion that nothing over the applied amount could be granted by any individual member. And the committee is quite comfortable with that, appreciated that as a limitation on our exercise of this process. Okay, in this current list of recommendations, I'm assuming you all have a copy of that. I'm actually working from my own notes rather than from that. There was even one particular applicant, actually one of the chamber projects for the welcome sign that may complicate issues here. At the initial vote for that, there were 2 votes for 0, and another vote that was later changed after discussion. And the issue there was whether or not that TAC funding was the appropriate venue to fund this. We ended up making a recommendation to substantially fund, but only to the tune of about 60, actually, I don't quite have the percentage on that one. It's more than half of what they feel would be involved. And the reason for it has to do with timing. The number of years that there's been an effort to improve the signage. The committee views it as part of the image of Cannon Beach. And we have a history of supporting institutions within Cannon Beach that seem to create a good image for the town. Things such as the theater, the whole project of Get Lit. We're recommending some funding for a culinary event, again, working on the image of town. We promote the image of town with video productions. There are a lot of events that happen, the cottage tour, that is really a community identifying thing that has more to do with image than the bottom line of support for business. And we think the image of town is helped with an appropriate image sign, not a McDonald's sign, but something that might be designed for town. A memory from my first year in town was watching John Fraser attempt to be arrested by painting a yellow line on Hemlock Street just from the crosswalk at Gower. He wanted to paint that 15 feet of yellow stripe there because it had been a project the city never got around to. And somehow this project echoed that in my mind, that it's something that the city probably would benefit on an image from and has never gotten around to, which is why there's a recommendation for funding within this. The 2 individuals who initially threw up zeros were myself and Mike Morgan.
But there were 3, I was in 0 too. I think I was a 0 too on that one when I came up.
You came up twice.
Okay.
To
I didn't come up
to-
close.
to 30,000, then to 35,000 after discussion. So committee members moved when we were motivated to do something we felt would help the community image. So partly, I think the committee process is able to work things out. But then I've thrown this right back into your lap to make your final determinations. Perhaps more complicated or not, I'm not sure. But are there any questions I can answer from the council?
Well, that one was one that I had picked out to ask you about. And the other one was Blush Lux, because I'd like to know how that fits with our image and art and all of that.
The committee was very supportive of the Women's Only Weekend. You'll notice it's simultaneous, a simultaneous event. At the time of the application, the latest American Craft magazine also had a whole image on cosmetics and makeup and that sort of thing. We felt that the organization of this was very good. The individual organizers were incredibly organized on top of the major questions. It was fairly substantially funded. And there's to the tune of 78% of their request. There is an overlap of individual businesses benefiting, but part of the content of their event was bringing in outside talent for this, a variety of makeup artists who we think are going to bring some of their own followings with them. And for me, it was the content of individual artists coming for that event. I think we can often look at content differences. I'm not as much interested in supporting labor to put things together as I am performing arts or the actual talent. And so this was not putting money into the hands of the individual organizers. In fact, they're going to be out money, but the funding is directed for outside talent coming in.
I would also add, I think not cosmetics, that's the wrong word. The artistry of makeup is an art, even though Mike Morgan doesn't agree with me, but I think it is an art. And I do think what's interesting about this event is right now it's tacked on to WOW. But she said it could easily be something that's moved off of WOW and into another part of the city, into another part of the calendar. Like say end of February, maybe that's a real interesting date. Because we got nothing in February. And it brings women to town and they spend money. So, and these, and the gals are, and it's not just, focusing on one business. They're working with all the, not the galleries, but the clothing shops in town. They've got their tendrils out trying to make it, whatever it happens with this weekend will be a bigger thing than just their business. So I'm the only woman on the committee.
And the variation into recommended amounts was about 60% from high to low. You'll see if you have those recommended numbers from individual members, you'll see quite a variety, some high differences, and some fairly flat in variations on the final recommendations.
Jim?
Yes.
And I'm sorry if I've missed something. Wasn't clear to me earlier that the one individual with all the zeros was not participating.
Oh, he was not at the meeting, didn't show up on Zoom. We had an absent member.
His numbers were not added.
Okay, that's my.
Yes, right, oh, yeah. And
So it's just exactly as if he was never there.
exactly, yes. Just as those items where I was recused, the average did not take me into account, they just erased me.
Okay,
So that would not affect the fluctuation of the numbers. The committee has worked through some of those issues that, we had individuals often overfunding. We do face issues where some people feel things should not be funded. And I have stuck with zeros in prior times. But anytime that occurred, my first question to the applicant at the time of application was, why do you think this should be funded through this committee? And I've had disagreements with committee members as well, but we always questioned the applicant. It was never just left as, well, I'm not going to do this one. There's always a reason asked for if we feel that the applicant is applying to the wrong funding source. Because I could see a lot of things that might more appropriately be in a city general fund, which is how I responded to the signage until the committee was discussing no action. And there I was, inspired by John Fraser.
You're trying to get arrested?
I can make that happen.
Come to the right place, Jim.
Jim, do you, as a committee, when somebody gives a zero to a particular, and it's not because of conflict of interest or anything like that, you ask them for the reason that they gave zero?
Oh, yes. We initially go through, we went through line by line, asking everyone for their recommendations on that amount. We simply went up through all of them. Then we went back over each line item to ask for reasons. And we are questioning highs and lows, particularly the lows and sometimes there are people who will want to fully fund. Others of us approach this procedure by saying, well, okay, there's a lot of requests, but no request is considered valid from the start, at least not in my thinking. There has to be, a reason for it to be funded. We do not assume that the applicants are automatically entitled to money because they have had money at prior times. The individual event has got to be judged for the planning. And if the planning isn't there, then you better come back in a different year.
I have a
Yes.
question. When an applicant doesn't get their ask,
Mhm.
most of them have other opportunities for more funding, different kind of fundraisers. Maybe they have a budget that they can shift around like the chamber. But when you ask for a welcome sign and you don't get that, are we just going to get a shoddy sign or no sign? Or
Depends on the city, right?
city didn't ask for it.
The city isn't doing it, so the chamber feels like they need to step forward and get it done because we're missing one on the
Yeah.
south and the one on the north, let's face it.
Oh, they're garbage, but,
Yeah.
and they have been for a long time, and the arts community was involved a long time ago with it, anyway. But my question is, I'm assuming that they came up and said, well, this is what it would cost for a new sign. We're going to ask for this amount. We don't get it. What happens then?
Well, their request was $70,000 for starters. They still would have to go through design review to get that sign placed. And I don't know the answer. I would assume that if it is not funded, they'll take the planning as far as they can go and then try to get funding from other businesses in town. That would be my natural move, to request a source of funding outside of council.
And if they can't come up with the funding to complete the sign, those monies go back to TAC.
Yes,
You can't shift it to some other program.
that is correct.
Okay.
That is correct. And in fact, there have been a few returns. There's even going to be a return coming from the gallery group of funding that was unspent for the intended purpose in the last round that will be coming back to the city. I think we've established that as a precedent. If you don't fulfill the intent of that funding, that it comes back to the city. And this began really with the city's request for return on unspent funding in a prior round.
Right.
And I think that the committee actually loves this idea.
Coaster is returning funding, as was Get Lit.
Get Lit?
Yes, yeah.
So there were several this year.
Well, I remember Parks spent an awful lot of time with trying to figure out a sign. And that was probably 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited if something can be done.
So this is why I had a partial apology for not making your job easier, because we've raised this particular issue as a plea that something, that the committee feels something should be done. And it's got to be adequate, or you're better off doing nothing.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Jim. Okay.
Thank you.
So like us to bring this to August 3rd. Okay, thank you, Jim. And committee.
Item 3 is paving. Karen.
Exception of last year, we come to each year with what the paving plan is for the year. So we were given $100,000 in the 2021-22 budget. And we put the project out to bid, and Bayview Asphalt's quote came in at $86,798 as the selected bid after we had gotten quotes from 4 companies. It was the lowest bid that came back to us. All paving projects associated with this contract will be completed by April 11th of 22. And the streets that are involved are in your attachment. There's 2 of these streets that will be doing major infrastructure repairs before we do the paving. One being Larch between First and Second, which has some sewer challenges there as well as storm. So we're going to take the opportunity to do those collectively as one project. And the other one is on East Harrison, where we've got a belly in our sewer line, and we'll be addressing that before we pave it. And the others are just straight overlays. Okay. Questions?
I had a question on the Larch project. It says, it gives a certain, I think it's Larch between First and Second, and then it says a section of Larch.
That was as a result of a cutting a contractor had to do in the street there on Larch. And so they did a patch repair, and we already had some challenges with that area needing to have an overlay. So it is a smaller section. It's not a complete street. We're going to do.
Where is that section? Is that
on North Larch?
Yeah.
You know what? I got to look at my map because I can't remember which cross streets that is on the north side, where a couple of new homes were built. I want to say it's between
maybe
Fifth and
Yeah, 5th and 6th, across from Rex and Diane, probably.
Neck of the woods.
Yeah, I know where you're talking about now.
Yeah.
So then we put that in, it's really larger than appropriate for our patch list, just because of its size.
You know, right there by Breakers on that side of the street, there's also a sinkhole there. Have you noticed that?
By Breakers?
Well, if you were to continue on up 5th Street, but you turn on Larch, it's on the east side of the street. And I go by it every day and think, wow, something should be done there. So Just bringing it up if you're going to be in there anyway.
I'm kind of like the grant group there. I don't always have enough coin to go around with the needs. We give it our best priority shot.
Well, look at that play because it's a hole.
Okay.
Thank you.
We good with the paving projects? Thank you, Karen. Okay, Jeff. For the zoning ordinance amendment 2101.
All right, Mayor, Council, thanks. This is Zone Ordinance Amendment 2101. And if you're following along at home, this starts at page 79 of your 263-page amended packet. And I'll refer to the staff report that this Haystack Rock originally brought this forward March 12th, 2021 to amend kind of a notice requirements regarding right-of-way access in the oceanfront management zone. And that's included in your packet, that original application. One of the things I want to point out too is on page 83 there, in the original application, you'll see it amended and asked for the building official shall concurrently provide notice of the decision to any property owner within 200 feet of the exterior boundary of the property who has requested notice of such permit decisions within prior 12 months. We responded in a work session. We held a couple of work sessions with the Planning Commission on this, that first off, we recommended that we hold this until the code audit was through. And then we said, if we don't do that, at least we would like to recommend that the language be changed, or we work with them, because we don't want to have to kind of keep up with all the requests of neighbors wanting to find out what their neighbors are doing. That's not our job. We don't have the staff. We don't have the resources to do that. We're working on better ways to be transparent and to communicate notices, and that's what we'll also try to focus on in the code audit. But we thought this was over and above trying to keep up with that and keep track of neighbors. We get that daily. And so we are working on actually, and hopefully we'll launch next week, a notice page for every notice that we produce. You'll be able to just go online and track. Many jurisdictions have that. So after those work sessions, we came up with the language that's pretty similar to what you see in the findings and recommendations, which are on page 89, that begins the Planning Commission's findings and recommendations that they approved. And those recommendations passed on a vote of all in favor but one. And you'll see that those recommendations on page 93 of the packet focus on the extension of improvements into right-of-way, into public right-of-ways that are in sensitive areas. So oceanfront management, stream corridors, wetlands, and those type of areas. You'll notice on the next page where there are some strike throughs. That's simply because what we've done is taken it from a development permit where it wasn't publicly noticed, that these are now would be a public hearing before the Planning Commission. So we've extended kind of a public notice requirements on anything that's going to be into sensitive areas. And, that's what the you'll see down on the next page, which is page 95. You'll see the conditional use permitted activities, and that's what that suggests. So one of the Opponents, Mr. Stamp had claimed that it was quasi judicial, that this was a property owner against a property owner. That constraints map that's included in your packets on page 97 specifically points out that this is not just one. This is all right of ways that fall into wetlands, many along the north end, many even over by me. Or stream corridors where a driveway access or a roadway of 50 linear feet or more might extend into those areas. So what this does, it just triggers a notice and a planning commission meeting on that project. Two other points. Like I said, many other areas, other jurisdictions, they do this. And so in your packets, I'll provide examples of other jurisdictions and how they do this. Pretty much every place I've worked, that's also how they work. And Mr. Stamp, on behalf of the Roberts, has also appealed the Planning Commission's decision. But since the Planning Commission's decision is just a recommendation to City Council, it will be going for a public hearing before the council. So Mr. Kabizman, land use attorney for the city, has called Mr. Stamp and from my understanding is discussing whether they want to pursue that appeal since it will have a public hearing and he'll be able to air his concerns at that meeting, just like in any legislative matter. I included the rest of the planning commission packet. Sorry, Nancy, for the
So it is a
scan.
thing packet.
Thanks to Jim, we amended that packet and hopefully that everybody, if you do have those kind of issues, please let us know because honestly, I don't get to reread it all and as much as I
You do, and
There were some repeats.
yeah, there were a lot of repeats.
Yeah.
I was getting to the point where I wasn't sure I was looking at this particular proposal or I was looking at 180 Elliott Way proposal, or I was looking at Forest Lawn proposal, or which one, because I mean, it was like, it wasn't just the packet of this one proposal, it was the packet with all of these proposals all being heard at the same time. So I was like, okay, these two aren't on the agenda. Am I supposed to be looking at these or what? It was a very confusing situation. If you can, I don't know if you can narrow, I know it takes work, but if you can narrow it down to keeping the minutes in the packet to the.
Just simply
we're supposed to.
trimming down to the minutes of that. Yeah, we can.
Yeah, that would be a lot more helpful because I wasn't sure what I was looking at.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I did a lot of page flipping.
I know, I did that too. I thought 536 pages, oh my God.
We can easily highlight that or
Right.
flip it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what these work sessions are for. Yeah, that's all I got. Any questions or thoughts? Like I said, in the in the actual meeting materials, we'll refine what you just said, but we'll also include some examples of other areas.
I like the idea of putting it into conditional use. What I don't understand is why it wasn't a conditional use in the first place.
Yeah.
It seems like it's so important, the question of right of way and driveways and access in wetlands and ocean zones. Why that wasn't in a conditional use in the first place, I don't understand that to be just an outright use. To me is just dangerous in this day and age. Is this affecting the Roberts' request at all or?
No, not this legislation, not this piece of legislation. In fact, this won't go into effect until you guys pass it and then a month passes. And so this has
to
do with that.
Pretty good. Okay.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Oh,
Could
stay
you-
quiet.
Answer one question.
I'm still here.
Gold bond standard, was that correct? There was a phrase that was used, like it was the standard, but I didn't know if that was correct or not.
I think what they're saying is the highest standard possible.
Yeah.
Whatever it was referring to, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, what's the update for the TSP?
For the update for the TSP, so tomorrow we will have updated materials on our Cannon-Beach-TSP.com website. Like I said, we had a great turnout for the transportation study, but we've even topped that with the parking study numbers. So if you haven't taken that Cannon-Beach-TSP.com parking study, and it's broken down into visitor, resident, employee, and business owner. If you haven't taken whichever applies to you, go on to Cannon-Beach-TSP.com and take one of those parking studies or the ones that apply. And we're going to keep that open through next week. And then we will come back, and probably the next time I speak to you, I'll have the transportation and the parking summaries for those as well.
If you're a resident, but you also work here and are an independent agent, how do you determine which is the?
Whichever you would like to answer that. I think if you do both, you do both. If you want to talk about your customers and how you
I
serve.
have a different head for each one.
Yeah.
I'm in the same boat.
Yeah.
Or car.
Well said,
Car.
Nancy. Thank you.
So go on that, go on the Cannon Beach TSP website as well. Like I said, next week we'll have additional materials on there from some of the existing condition studies and parking study, and some of that will also be online. All right.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, next one, Bruce, construction delivery.
It sounds than what it is. It's what kind of a contract you want to use to do the Cannon Beach Elementary project. Where this came from is that we had said that we would provide you with the scope in order for you to do that review. And then in doing the scope, Jen brought to my attention that actually the council approves the RFP or the RFQ. And so that goes beyond what was just in the scope. And then when you get to that point, there's a question, do you want to use, work with like an architect, general contractor, which is, I guess, the traditional one. And then there's one that I've used on similar projects, it worked out really well, which is called CMGC, which is construction manager, and then general contractor once you start the construction. And the advantage of that particular model is that when you have a project like Cannon Beach Elementary, instead of the contractor coming on to the scene after the drawings are done and the bids have been done, all those kind of things, the CMGC is kind of a hybrid where you hire a company, and it would be a company like O'Brien or somebody like that that knows how to do these. And you hire them shortly after the architect. And then the way that it works is that they get 2 fees. They don't bid on anything. There will be fees that you negotiate. The first fee is to come in shortly after you start design and you've had discussions with the community and all that. And you start getting into schematic designs, that sort of thing. You have the person or the firm that's going to build the project and solve the project, problems. You have them working with the architect. And so when they're going in and trying to decide a roof system or whatever the things are, try to figure out how to get the plumbing from A to B, all that, the construction manager works with the architect, and then they develop a set of bids. And so you have the person that's going to build it working there. Then you go through this magical transformation. I'm sorry. And then in my experience, they have 3 bid packages. And it's essentially the city that's going out for bid. So the bids come back to us, so there's no mystery. And so we know how much each of the subcontracts is. But the subcontracts get turned over to the, what was the construction manager, now they're the general contractor. And they also make a fee for that part of the project. So that, what they're going to get paid is already determined. They don't have the, an incentive for change orders, anything like that. And each of the bid packages has been, they were involved with how the work would be divided between the different trades, those kind of things. And so it's kind of like a partner going through design that has the construction expertise. And then you turn it over to them, and then it is their project with those subcontractors to go ahead and work on it. And so then it becomes almost like a traditional project, except they're being paid a fee. And I did City Hall, Police Station, Public Works Yard, and it worked great because they've already answered the questions. They're not seeing things for the first time. So my recommendation in this project, which is, even on the architectural side, there is just an awful lot of more like straight engineering and analysis of current conditions, those kinds of things, more than, an architectural, a lot of architectural features to it. And so by having the person that's going to build it, be involved with how the design comes together and how the bid packages are put together, I just strongly recommend that be the model. The reason we're asking the question now is that, well, first of all, it wasn't just the scope that I owed you, it was the entire contract. And so we need to know which model it's going to be. And again, it's not as exotic as it sounds, but for this kind of a project to have the builder right there in developing the bid specifications for the subcontractors, I think it's the best product that we will be able to get, as opposed to having somebody come in new and then look at the plans and say, well, that's a problem, you can't build that kind of thing. So I'm just suggesting that we do the construction manager, general contractor with it, and then the architect. Even the architect's contract has changed because the architect will not be working totally independently. They'll be working in conjunction with the construction manager on developing the bid packages. So it does impact those contracts.
It appears it would be limiting who might be able to work on the project because you would be requiring a certain setup initially. Maybe Sam and Brandon could give more insight into that, but I was thinking a special architect wouldn't necessarily have the construction piece with them.
You're correct. In most cases, the architect won't have it, which is why you would want to go ahead and bring it in. And this is used pretty commonly. And so most, general contractors have a construction management branch on how they would.
Kind of takes the creativity away though, doesn't it?
Well, they don't really care like what the architectural features and kind of things are, but they do care about where the mechanical, electrical, plumbing is the best place to go ahead and locate that. Is there anything there that you can still use? If not, what is easier? Is there an easier way to go ahead and install? Or if somebody from the architectural firm thinks, well, this is an easy way to solve this, and they go, no. We don't want to get involved with that because they built things before.
Yeah, let me try my explanation, because my sense of it is that this person generally becomes a bridge between the design element and the construction element. So they are kind of involved in the design element by giving information to the designer, the architects.
But the architect could be an individual.
Architect could be an individual or a firm or whatever. But this person then becomes the person who is involved in understanding the design and how it came about. And then they transition over to become kind of the guys who were explaining to the builders and the subcontractors and plumbers and all those guys how this came about from the design sense. So they are,
Translator.
yeah, they're also kind of the person that just is aware of everything along the process. In that sense, it could be a middleman that we have to, and they have some juice in how things are put together. But that would be this person becomes the person that we connect with, correct?
Kind of. And Robin, you asked a very important question, and I'm sorry that I missed it. You would hire an architect engineering firm, and they would go all the way through and do a lot of the traditional things, except they would be assisted by the construction manager during the design phase. And when we get to the point that we're doing the construction, the people that are going to do this are general contractors. And so they have the experience building the buildings, those kind of things, and they take over as the general contractor. And with my training, I'm pretty nuts that none of us talk to the contractor. We only deal with the architect. The architect is the only one that deals with the contractor. And all of the orders and all the directions and everything, the information all flows that way. And so, to Sam's point, the person that they would become the general contractor. They would work with the general contractor. They would have the general contract over the 3 subs. And the subs would include mechanical, electrical, plumbing, civil, and there's another, and I forgot what category it would fall in. But they would be they would act as the general contractor at that point.
I'd say it's been a long time since I've been involved with this, but I worked for a company that had lots of engineers and constructors and built a lot of compressor stations and operation centers and so forth. And we needed a new operation center. And since the company had all this talent, they said, well, we'll do it. And what end result was that we got an architect, they did it. And then the contractors, which were ourselves and some general contractors, you found that nobody talked to each other. They designed something that wouldn't accommodate the facilities that had to go into it, the heating, air conditioning. They made a shot at it, but it was very inefficient. Things had to be redone. You ended up going back and forth between the contractor and the designer, the architect. And there was a lot of finger pointing. Well, that's what was on the drawing. No, didn't tell you that, that sort of thing. The next time was a major office building downtown Salt Lake. And at that point, did pretty much what Bruce is describing, turned it over. And the company kind of stayed out of it with all their engineers and construction guys. And you ended up having a building that was designed in coordination with a construction company. And frankly, it went very much smoother. And to the extent that there's any finger pointing, it was all pointing to themselves, because it was basically, they had worked with their contractor and their architect and worked together. And it flowed well. It really did seem to work. And I think that's the kind of thing Bruce is talking about.
Yeah.
How would the general contractor be hired? Would the architect hire the general contractor? Would the city hire the general, and would there be bids?
The city will go through a process to hire the architect engineer. And then shortly thereafter, we go through a process and hire the CMGC, which is construction manager, to become the general contractor. We would hire them. We would hire the architect for a fee. And then when we hired the construction manager GC, we would hire them, and there would be a fee for the portion of the contract where they act as the construction manager. And then there would be a fee for the part when they get to becoming the general contractor. A benefit of this is that with the first example that Mike gave, general contractor is just there going ahead and figuring out how many change orders they can make out of this. And there's no incentive for the general contractor in this model because they're only going to get a fee. And if it takes longer and there was a mistake so that there's actually change orders, because we might have to pay change orders to the subcontractors, it just makes them stay on the job longer. So it's an inefficiency for them.
So obviously we would put a request for proposals out for the architect and architect engineer. And there would be a competitive bidding process or a selection process.
Yes.
Now, would the architect be involved in the selection process for the contractor? So how do we know they can actually even get along?
You can have them involved. I would rather keep them separate. But, these people are professionals and and pretty much they know each other because the industry around here is not that big. But they're going to come in and they've got a responsibility and they've done it enough times. And I think that when the CMGC is acting as construction manager, they have a different personality type and trying to go ahead and resolve issues and work together on things. But then when it gets over to the general contractor, then they are in charge. And so the way that from a contract standpoint, we would hire the architect engineer. We would hire the CMGC. The contract would say between the two of them, you guys work together and give us the best set of plans that you can. And there would be some specifics associated with that. And then when we get into the GC portion, we will be going through a bid process and then working with the general contractor. We'll select the 3 subcontractors. And then so we hire the 3 subcontractors. They are working, the general contractor at that point is working to make sure that the building gets built the way that the plans were there. However, if there's any issues during that time, they already have a working relationship with the architectural firm. And, they say, hey, we didn't see this or whatever. So one of the things that, amazed me is we didn't have, I think we had some minor change orders, but they were just things that were, either owner decisions or something like that. But we didn't have the finger pointing and the hassle because these guys know exactly what they were getting into and had input into it.
And the architect would use the ideas that the community has toward the development of
the architect is basically stays the same as far as what we would all see, except that when they get into, the design development and contract drawings, they are going to be working, which really is not usually of interest to us. But when they get into that point, they'll be working closely with the CM at that during that. Again, he or she is going to be the one that builds it.
but using the ideas that the community is.
Yeah, and that's all the architects. The CM doesn't care what color it is, anything like that. That's all the creativity is on that side. But there's a great deal of creativity in solving problems, construction problems that you've got right from pretty close from the beginning.
I believe you've addressed all of my concerns with your proposal. I just see this project as having a litany of problems that will be, encountered throughout the whole construction process.
Mm-hmm.
To the end that it makes the process able to move forward. I think what you're proposing will do that.
We'll find more things than we would if it was just the architect during design.
Exactly.
And then when we get to all the problems, the person that's solving them on the construction side doesn't have an incentive to make them more expensive.
That would be my hope. Yeah.
Yeah, it could be good because it's a fee. They're getting paid a fee.
So just for the nuts and bolts of it, since they're being paid a fee, does the fee involve them being paid for the length of the project? Or is it more like a bid where they're just paid a set fee regardless of how long the project takes?
Set fee. Now, there might be something in the contract that says if it goes over 180 days or something like that, it would be so much per day. But there's not a real incentive to go ahead and extend it. I mean, we wouldn't make it very lucrative for them to stay here for a long time.
Well, I would think it would be difficult for somebody to do that type of project, knowing the type of project that it will be, be able to offer a fixed fee for that type of service.
But they do. We were able to get to that.
I'll take you at your word. I'm just seeing that there's going to be so many problems. In order to get the job done effectively, they're going to have to manage the project through to the end.
Right.
And my feeling is it will just take longer than we anticipate.
Well, I think the project will take longer than we anticipate. I think, my recommendation would be that we go with CMGC because it's more of a collaborator than what you have when you have a general contractor.
My concern, I guess, is that if someone were up against the pressures of a bidded fee, that they would be incentivized to cut corners in order to make the project conform to that.
If they
fee scale.
There's no reason for them to cut corners because they, like, for example, if one of the subcontracts is $1 million, if somehow they can go ahead and they can reduce that to 900,000, they don't share in that 100. They don't get to keep that money. They're going to get paid the fee for the.
I understand.
Yeah. So there's no, but a general contractor would be able to, make, all kinds of claims. But I guess, where I like it is that when they go in and they're trying to decide where's the best place to run the waste lines and bring in water and power and all that, they're going to be there with somebody with jackhammers, looking what's underneath during design. So I think we'll have less unknowns when we go through that.
I completely agree with what you're saying. I'm trying to sort of game out how this could transpire, and I'm just trying to figure out a way for it to work in the city's best interest.
Yeah. And again, my opinion, the model works in our best interest, and that's based on 3 buildings that I was involved with that.
Were they remodels or were they new construction?
One was remodeled, the other 2, no, I'm sorry. Yeah, it was 1 remodel and then 2 construction.
What were they?
A city hall, a police station, and a public works yard. And the city hall, at one time was city hall with police station. And then we tore down the police station, built a new city hall function where that was, and then remodeled what was city hall. So we had remodeling, we had all those, kind of components in.
I think what maybe Brandon's getting at is government contracts on a fixed fee. When they start to get near the end of their fee, start worrying about them starting to cut costs because after that, it's just eating into their profit. There are a number of mechanisms in a contract to address those issues.
Right.
And I'm not in favor of cost plus either. But there have been incentives for getting done earlier. It doesn't mean that they reduce the amount of studs in the wall, is that you have the general manager for that, your contract manager. And you have the specifications. They have to build it to specifications. But if you offer that incentive, then there'd also be a penalty for overruns. And it puts some pressure on them, but having this joint relationship, you got somebody that's been involved from the very beginning to the specifications to the final product. So there's an incentive, not necessarily financial, but there's an incentive to get the job done efficiently and correctly. Because you're gonna be wanting to get another job after that.
They want those plans to be as good as they can to go ahead and put the building together. I think there's another part too that I don't think I've explained, is that I believe, and this will be an Ashley question, but when we did this, people, the CMGC candidates don't come in and throw a price on the table. There's an interview process. You talk to other people that have, that have been clients, those kind of things. So you're actually doing it based on qualifications and fit, kind of like when you're hiring an architect. So you don't have Chuck in a truck show up and say that he's a construction manager and, just give a lowball figure. We're not going to hire somebody that hasn't done this kind of work under this sort of a contract in the Pacific Northwest.
This is where references and interviewing references becomes very important.
Yeah. But it's not a low bid situation like you might end up having with a general contractor.
All right. I guess it would be my hope is that we're able to hire both an architect and the CMGC that has the experience to work on a project like we have, because I think it's quite unique and the potential for success is there, but the challenges are going to be quite large.
And that's when we go through, like when we're hiring the architect, when we're hiring the CMGC, is, it's not just show us pictures of stuff that you've done. It's tell us about projects like this that you've worked on. Give us the name of the architectural firm that you worked with and whoever your client contact was. And, you kind of follow up from that side.
Okay. Well, I'm certainly in support of it. I have concerns and I just wanted to voice them.
No, thank you. And you'll see the contracts. Because now when we do it's not just the scope that I was proposing, but when Ashley's firm puts together that part of the contract, you'll see the whole thing for both disciplines. And the council, if I'm trying to recall, but I believe council will be the one that awards the general contracts. The probably 3, maybe 4 contracts for the subs. And then when you award them, then they belong to the general contractor. Everybody's contracts will say that, like if I'm a subcontractor, once I get hired and, suppose it's the Ogilvy construction manager / GC, I will work for you just as if you hired your own subcontractors. You have all the control that you had as if you were just the general contractor. But we've seen all the books.
Okay.
So will we be hiring the architect as well?
Yes, you'll hire the architect first, the architect engineer. Then you go ahead and you start working on all of the things that, you want to go ahead and get the public input and all that, because you don't need a CMGC. But that's when you start the CMGC process.
Is it difficult to have an architect who's an engineer too? No?
What happened is, some firms, like for example, ZCS is an architectural engineering firm. Most of my other experience has been that it's an architectural firm that has engineering subcontractors within their contract. So they kind of put themselves together for various projects. But in each case, we're, again, I want it to be a beautiful project and all that, but I'm very interested in the engineer. Because that's really, as Brandon says, that's where all of our problems are going to come from. And so we're going to, somebody better offer us some really good people.
Does Barry Elsner, our law firm, have the expertise within their shop to address this, what I see as a more complex contractual agreement?
I had a couple of conversations with Ashley about this, and I got the impression that she did. But if she doesn't, then we would probably have them subcontract, or else we would just direct contract with a firm that has this expertise.
So the contract becomes a guideline for everything else.
Sure. So if you folks are okay with this, then the next thing you see from us will be a contract for the architect engineer. They will have the components of them working with a CMGC all the way through their contract from start to finish. Then you will see the contract for the CMGC.
The contract for the architect has the scope of work.
As will the CMGC.
And how soon do you believe you may be able to start that?
I think in trying to coordinate, we have to find a firm that has the contracts and the experience, because that's going to be the majority of what gets put out, and then we put a scope in it. So when Ashley gets back, which is tomorrow, we'll start working on that.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Next item, temporary facilities at downtown park.
Yes, we received a letter from Carmen Swigert, and talking about concerns that she had about a storage unit. And then I'm sure that she'll have the same concerns over a portlet that was delivered on Friday. And these were put in place to assist one particular partner, which is Coaster Construction. And they're saying, because they're putting in 2 plays every weekend.
Coaster Theater.
Coaster Theater.
Coaster Theater, I'm sorry. To
You telling his crew do a play?
Yeah.
John,
They so-
bring a little-
yeah, I hope John doesn't sing, but anyway, those are things that they said it would be great if we didn't have to move everything every time, that sort of thing. And we did bring this, to council. I asked council in the good of the order, I think it was May 4th. And we talked about, but I didn't talk about the portlet, but it's an 8x10. It is located away from the band shell itself. And it's an area, because Robin had asked us, is it wet there? And we put in a leveling layer of gravel for that to be in there. And that was something that it was, because we're the sponsor, and we actually started this when we were still in COVID kind of restrictions, that I brought it to you to make sure that you folks will be okay with that. And that's what we ended up with after the 4th. I am aware of Carmen's concerns, and we've tried to make it as unobtrusive as we can. And it will come out there at the end of the season with Coaster. And, it may be something that we want to look at if we want to continue having this type of events, that we maybe need to, do an addition on the back of the band shell or something. But
My
that's-
concern was that the letter that Carmen wrote was June 3rd. And I see that it was stamped July 2nd.
Mhm.
So there was a whole month that went by without this being sent to us.
We didn't receive it until July.
Yeah, I don't know that.
I spoke with Carmen. and
Oh, did you?
She verified that fact.
Okay,
Yeah.
I did too.
Yeah, well, I saw the same thing.
okay. Yeah, that was my concern, is that we weren't responding
No,
to her concerns, so.
no.
And to her concerns, I would say that in hindsight, I completely agree with what we agreed on, and your ask was completely reasonable. Had I known what it was going to look like, I may have asked to do something differently.
Okay.
And, I think it's just an example of us trying to help out Coaster Theater. But when that's taken away, I would ask that the area be returned to
For sure.
its
Gravel out.
former state.
Yeah.
As
I'll take it out.
reasonably as that's able to do.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
In terms of the porta potty, unfortunately, apparently it has a lock on it.
Mm-mm.
No,
I don't think so because the lock is, there's no lock on the porta potty. That was a discussion we had. And it's because it has to be serviced and we don't know when they're going to come. And so we left it that we did not put a lock on it.
I had a lock on it a couple days ago.
Is there a lock on it now, Karen?
There's not a lock on it at this time. They have to service it each week.
Right,
So
but
they would have to get into that porta potty, and then it's a matter of coordinating the locking and unlocking of it. We have not.
both Brandon and Sam saw a lock on it recently. So we need to check that.
Okay.
I don't know if somebody else might have put it on, maybe Patrick did. But our intention was not to, just because, of the servicing aspects.
Well, I went walking by it on the weekend
Yeah.
and I was realizing, oh, good thing it has a lock on it because there's like 50 people looking at whether they could use it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
so apparently the problem is that they're just using the area,
Ooh,
which, I don't know what the answer to that is.
Yeah, and I don't know if they were doing that before either.
They were
They were? Okay.
not the theater folks, but
Right.
general public were,
Yeah.
yes. Which is
Karen is found.
different problem.
Yes, I don't want to beleaguer that too much. There's a public restroom within easy walking distance of it, and
Yeah, I'm not sure if locking it help make them go across the street or having it open that they might use it.
Okay.
But it would not be my choice of putting a facility like that, but I understand from the theater,
yeah, so then
did not run across the field, so.
When I talked to Carmen, my understanding and what I explained to her was that it would be gone when we figure out that we're not using the bandstand to that extent. And I did mention that when we do consider, if we consider something else for further summers or even all year, it would be a better looking type of construction.
Yeah, and I think too that depending on what Kosher's plans are, they love being able to go ahead and do this, but I don't think they get near the revenue they would if they were in their own facility. If they don't continue and, I don't think we need this kind of stuff for as a musical venue. This was just for the theater.
Okay. Next item, last item. City manager contract for provided vehicle. Want to explain that, Chris?
Yes, sir. When I got my job here, I had the option of either having a vehicle allowance or a city provided vehicle. And I chose the city provided vehicle and I've had one since. One of the things that is kind of nudging me in this direction is the ethics complaints that have come up. And if they only have to be allegations and they're going in and they're being picked up by the Oregon Government Ethics Commission, that it's very easy to make an ethics complaint right now. And that's one of those things, if I am seen at Safeway, is it because I'm picking up something for the city or because I was in Seaside on my way home and I stopped? If all somebody's got to do is make an allegation on it. And so I'm in my, discussion with my wife is that it's time to, make that kind of a change. Any place I've worked, I've always had the option of either or. And Jason has a vehicle allowance, but I would like to do a modification to my contract to accommodate that. And there's actually a vehicle, $36,000 that has, been approved, actually it's been approved for 2 years, but I canceled it the year before because of COVID. And that is something that we will cancel because that won't be needed. And if you decide not to do it, then we'll just continue on that path. But my preference, and it's from my contract standpoint, and I, again, was afforded this opportunity, is to just, switch over. And then all the vehicle responsibility is mine.
So you'd pay your own insurance and all of that
Yeah.
Well, with a $500.
when he's not working.
stipend.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I guess one concern I do have, and it's, I think your request is completely valid, is that the city owns the vehicle and then can, do with it as it pleases.
Mhm.
But if we just pay out the $500 a month,
Mhm.
where is the equity in that for the city?
I think, well, the equity is that you wouldn't need to buy the vehicle. And like if you look at a payback on it, it's like 6-7 years or something before it would make the vehicle allowance would end up being more than what the vehicle maintenance and purchase and gas and all that would be. So there is a cost over, a significant cost over a long period of time. And what it does, it transfers a lot of that responsibility to me.
Sure, and I appreciate that. I was trying to do the math in my head and
There's so many variables on it and trying to do it,
well, say we just buy the $36,000 vehicle.
Mhm.
We'd pay cash.
Mhm.
And we'd have the truck, and then when you no longer needed it, we could sell it or do something else with it.
Mhm.
And I guess I'm trying to figure out how the $500 a month going out, we aren't able to get a return on that.
And I don't know if there's a return on it or a way to go ahead and calculate what that might be. The amount that I'm asking for is what my option was in my last job. It was $500 or a vehicle, and they provided me with a Tahoe. And so I'm just asking essentially for what is not that. It's pretty common.
I completely agree. I just wanted to have the discussion about it.
No, sure, and I appreciate it.
So with the car you have now, does the city pay all the maintenance, insurance,
Mhm.
handles the repairs, all that?
Mhm.
What about gasoline?
City?
And you turn in a report on how much was for city business and a mileage expense account?
Yeah, it's even.
It's almost all city business except my half mile down, half mile back.
Right. And with the allowance, you be still looking at city providing the gas?
No.
City wouldn't provide the maintenance, the insurance, the fuel costs. I think that's where the.
It's a break even kind of situation. Really.
I just didn't know what the figures would be.
I just don't know the absolute amount, but you look at leasing a vehicle of any significant size in the $36,000 range, you're going to be looking at a lease payment of about that much.
Plus everything else.
Plus everything else.
and if you lease it, you're limited mileage wise too.
Oh, yeah, you lease yours.
I know these things. And you get really dinged at the end.
That's
You
why-
go
That's
over.
why we bought our last one.
That's right. Yeah.
So anyway, that's my request. I know you can't make a final decision tonight, but if y'all are nodding your heads in the right direction, then we would cancel the order on the truck. And then this would be before you on August 3rd. And I think there has to be a little bit of leeway on when it would take effect, because I have to have a car. And I can't go by without a car. So it might take a month or two to make that acquisition.
Carmen hasn't.
Can we just rely on you to tell us how much time you need?
Sure.
I
Yeah,
mean, that's what, whatever's reasonable.
sure.
Do you need to go get one?
Yeah.
Okay.
A good salesman will get you one in a minute or two.
Oh, I know, yeah. Yeah, I think I know that person too.
Damn, I just got rid of.
Might have a spare bike.
Could have given it to her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jason might have a spare bike in the garage.
Yeah. Well, and
That's
Carmen
where
has
you got
horses. I don't know
yours.
why you don't.
Jason has a helicopter somewhere.
Can you pick him up
Sure.
on the Blackhawk and?
Every morning.
You won't even give me a ride.
Okay.
That's fine.
You're all good with that?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay, then thank you. And then we'll put it on the August 3rd.
Right.
All right, thank you.
Okay, anything for good of the order?
Yes. I was a little disturbed the other night when Daryl Thompson talked about the rating scale that I didn't fill out. And I wanted to make a public comment about he either didn't listen to the Zoom meeting, he didn't listen to the video, or he didn't read the newspaper when I was quoted. And this was in May 14th, 2021. The members of the Cannon Beach City Council were asked to fill out a form that compared various sites for a possible new City Hall Police Station facility on a numerical rating scale. One counselor, Robin Risley, took issue with this and wrote the following objection and explanation. So I actually presented this to the city here, as stated in the council May 11th packet. Site selection is too important to rush, Risley stated. I'm not ready to fill out the form as it is presented. The form guides one to a preset conclusion without all the information because a fixed date for a bond measure has been set. This reasoning is unacceptable to me. Here are my thoughts. If the council is ready to dismiss the fact that the city hall where it sits is in the area where 15 out of 19 big events have taken place, that we understand the risk and emphasize the importance of evacuation training for the people who will work there, then my recommendation would be to select multiple locations to build redundancy and backup so that when the event does occur, one or maybe two of the sites will be standing. The current city hall could be retrofitted, hardened, anchored, and remodeled. The cost would be less and might come out of a general fund. We need the one-story building to reflect our village character, and it would be in the center of town. As many have said, they would like this. This would save the cost of soil remediation, and the appraisal was low for the subject property. The council chamber management, finance, HRAP, and IT could all be located here. The public works yard is already located up Elk Creek Road. There are computers and equipment already in place. The planning department and public works could be located on site, the command center safely out of tsunami risk. This leaves the police station, which should be located at Southwind along with emergency functions, or we bite the bullet, plan for the future 20, 30, 40 years down the road and jump the highway to Southwind. This would require a bond. It is important that the infrastructure bond not be tied to the city hall bond. Our citizens deserve a choice. This is what I said, and I want it on the record. Thank you.
Anybody else have anything for good of the order?
A coffee with the counselors on Monday, 10 a.m. Or come into the city council. Robin and I will be there.
Do you have coffee?
Yeah, I have coffee.
Okay.
Robin doesn't always have coffee, but
We kind of bring our own staff. Yeah.
For tomorrow's meeting, do we need to discuss the public comment phase at all? If there will be one?
There will be one. Yeah. What do you mean? I don't understand.
I guess that's my main concern.
Public comment, I always do.
Do we have a list of people that have?
I have a few people who've requested to speak, yes.
Yeah.
And then I've been sending out letters as they come in and they'll all be added to the website tomorrow at noon at the deadline. So, but you've already received everything that we've received.
Okay. Good. We are adjourned.
Oh, well, I didn't-